morning, good afternoon, or good evening, however this might find you. Welcome to Riffing on Main Street. I'm Ken Elmore, the proud president of Dean College, and I'm here with a special guest, Michael Walker Jones. And we are going to just riff a little bit, talk a little bit, get a sense of who you are, get a sense of some of the politics of the day, and maybe even talk a little bit about some of those things that I can take and put here in Franklin and Dean College that'll make a difference.
Wonderful.
So first things first. Tell us who you are. Don't give me a title or anything else. Who are you and who are you really?
First off, let me give you a welcome.
All right.
All right. You and I have talked a couple of times since you've come, but welcome to Franklin and welcome to the presidency of Dean College.
Thank you.
It is such a pleasure not only to have you here in town, but also to be a part of the community. I've been a part of this community for over 30 years. I came here from Arkansas. From the Arkansas Education Association. I came specifically to work with the Mass Teachers Association. My wife and I my wife's from Illinois. She passed away 3 years ago. We raised 2 children here. And I'm originally from Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville.
And I have found that my tenure in Massachusetts has been not only joyous, but also in the midst of all of the politics. I found it not only to be pleasurable, but I've been a real proud member of this community. I used to run the July 4th celebration with my good friend Mike Kelly. We took it over when the town sort of gave that responsibility to the citizens. I've been on the Charter Commission here. And most of all, I am a person, not only a person of God, but also a university person. I love education. My children have graduated from Franklin. And for the most part, I guess I would say that I am also still curious after 74 years of life, and I'm happy to not only share with you some of my experiences, but also sort of bring to you some of the messages from my consultancy. I'm a higher ed consultant. In a nutshell, that's about me.
That's a good nutshell. So why Franklin? I mean, you could have done your work in just about anywhere else in Massachusetts, or at least in eastern Massachusetts, but Franklin.
Well, believe it or not, we started off in Marlborough. When we were looking for a house, Franklin was the fastest growing community in the state of Massachusetts, with reason. It had the best housing stock and a school district that was moving toward becoming one of the best in the state. And I think at this point, I can clearly say we are one of the best school systems in the state.
Right.
And as a result of looking around, Franklin, and getting very, very lucky in terms of house price.
Sure.
We were able to move here. And like I said, have enjoyed it ever since. We came from Little Rock, Arkansas. And if it's any consolation to my fellow citizens, let me tell you, sticker shock is real. When we moved from Little Rock to Massachusetts, we thought we were buried in terms of house price.
Right.
And come to find out, Franklin was very affordable and very modest at the time. So that's why Franklin. And we have not regretted not one moment of it.
I see, and you stayed as well.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know, so I'm sure the sticker price is still, the sticker shock is still there.
Oh, yeah.
To this day. But, you know, that raises that question. I mean, you achieve these things, great schools, you have a housing stock. Do you feel, what do you feel in terms of going forward, innovation, changes, those sorts of things? Will they still happen? Can they still happen? And do you see them happening in and around this space?
I do. I enjoy Franklin for its openness, for the conversation that takes place amongst our town council, amongst our school committee. Some of my best friends have been on the school committee for years and years. I think that, again, our administration and the faculty are top-notch. But at the same time, I believe, too, that this is a great community to raise a family. My house, which started out as a modest 6-bedroom house has now moved into the area of people are calling me constantly, wanting me to sell. And I understand that. I am living in my house by myself now. The family's gone. My wife, bless her heart and rest her soul, it has departed, and so it's a matter of, yes, I'm going to find a way to stay in Franklin.
Right.
I'll probably end up with a condo or something, but I have no intentions of moving out of this community. I love this community. I want to be a part of it. I want to be a part of the decision-making structure in this community, and I just absolutely have some great friends that I adore.
So you've been in education practically all your life.
All my life.
What drew you there? How'd you go into that to decide that that's a profession, that's a space?
It's a great question. Our good friend Frank Falvey asked me that question years ago. I'll give you the absolute inner core value structure in terms of why education. I started off life to become an architect.
Okay.
I went to the HBCU, Howard University in 1967. Unfortunately, I went sight unseen, which is common for first generation folks who know nothing, especially back in the day.
I was the same way. I went sight unseen.
Sight unseen.
I applied, I got in,
exactly. Almost
showed up one day.
Every single university, back in our day, the trend was you applied, you had some help maybe from a couple of agencies,
right,
but you had no clue that it was appropriate to go to the campus.
Right.
I didn't even have any concept that you could negotiate over scholarship.
Right.
My great-grandmother, as a matter of fact, this is a great story. My great-grandmother, when I got the acceptance letter from Howard, so that's great. I later got an acceptance letter from the University of Kentucky, University of Cincinnati, from Washington and Lee, and a number of other colleges. The first scholarship letter that I received was from Howard University. And what happened there was, when I got it, my great-grandmother said, well, these people really want you because they're going to give you some money. We need it. So I signed the letter.
Okay.
And said, okay, I'll accept the scholarship and come to Howard. When the other scholarship letters started to come in, here's what my great-grandmother said. You've already promised those people that you're going to come, so I don't care what the other people have said. You've already made a commitment.
Yeah.
And in our family, your word was your bond.
That's right.
When you said you were going to do something, you did it. So my great-grandmother gave me no choice. Now, later on, I discovered that, well, you should have waited.
Right.
Or you should have told Howard, yes, this is a letter, but I'm going to rescind that if you got better offers. But not in our family. Didn't work that way. So that's how I ended up at Howard. In '68, if you may recall, Dr. King was killed in the spring of that year.
April 4th.
Howard University closed down because the neighborhood that we were in went up in flames. And President Cheeks closed the university, sent us all home. And the rest for me is history. I never was able to get back to Howard.
Is that right?
To finish my architectural work, but I had always intended to become an architect and to teach. So the second part of my life, which was now this teaching passion, still remained. And from the University of Rochester, I moved on, became a teacher, elementary school, preschool. I taught high school. I taught graduate school. I've supervised doctoral students. And the only thing I have never had on my resume, nor have I intended, was to teach middle school.
You didn't, not even intend.
Not even
You didn't really want to do that.
I did not. Not only is that the Lord's work, but anyone who does it, and my wife, bless her heart, rest her soul, she was a middle school teacher. And so she got her crown here on earth.
Yes.
Okay.
They pin medals on you for that.
Oh my goodness and stuff. So I have the utmost deep respect for middle school teachers. They are saints. They are saints. But yes, and education, not only in terms of teaching, but also policy, has been a real passion of mine in my entire career.
So you started at HBCU, and you've done a lot of work around and in spaces with HBCUs as well.
Yes.
And, you know, look, let's go into the politics of the day. Boy, what a complicated sort of thing right now with decisions about whether or not we can think about race consciousness. And there are lots of questions about what status and what state of an HBCU now. And by that, I mean a historically black college or university or minority serving institution of some sort. But it's changing. And just this whole conversation is a little bit tenuous, uncertain, weird. Where are we? I mean, you work with consortiums of HBCUs, schools that were underfunded for years, schools where there had to be a level of race consciousness in order for them to be what they are, to thrive, to survive, and still questions about survival. And then what we do with students who want to be in places where they feel welcomed, where they want a level of cultural connection. So what's next? What's up?
Well, two things. First, let me say that we live in some very interesting times.
Not the first time you've lived in interesting times.
No, that's correct. But let me also say, too, these times are interesting, but they are not new.
Right.
And here's what I mean by that. For example, the Supreme Court's action on affirmative action.
Sure.
And the fact that they have now ruled that race cannot be a primary or what I would call secondary criteria for diversifying your student population.
Right.
Okay. The Supreme Court has done this before.
Tell us when. Tell us when.
So let's go back to 1870.
Okay.
Let's go back to...
That's way back.
Again, our history is interwoven with repetitiveness. And once we were freed, and there's some controversy about when we were freed.
Sure.
Some say it was with the Emancipation Proclamation. Some say it was Juneteenth. Some say it was actually even somewhere in between there. But the idea was that here we have newly freed slaves who were commodities from the inception of our country. And now, what are we going to do in terms of our Constitution when our Constitution did not recognize these folks as real people?
Correct.
So, when the slaves were freed, the Constitution was modified to say, oh yeah, by the way, these folks who we've held in slavery now are freed and they have the rights of citizenship. And those citizenship rights were not only embedded in the language of freedom, around the 13th and the 14th Amendment, which says we have all of the privileges of being citizens. Then there was the passage by Congress of the first Civil Rights Act, which then codified how these newly freed slaves could vote, own property, be held responsible in the courts, and also be a part of the court system in that we could be on juries and, again, exercise all of the rights of citizenship. Well, come 1872.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court had put before it this question of, we're giving more rights to these newly freed slaves than we are our regular citizens. And here's why. Because we're supposed to be a country where all of us are equal, right? Well, now let's go back just for a minute and say, well, that wasn't the case when Jefferson and Franklin and all those people were meeting in Philadelphia. They had some compromises that led to commodities. All right, now jump forward again to 1872. The court says, but now everyone's freed. So let's get into this issue of, have we given them more rights than we have every other citizen? Supreme Court says, yes, we have. And ergo, we cannot give them super rights because they are newly freed slaves. And so we're going to take away most of the things that Congress put into the first Civil Rights Act. We're going to modify the fact that you cannot have different kinds of means of voting registration for black folks as you do for white folks, It all has to be the same. But in essence, here's the way it was read. We can put in any kind of voting restrictions that we want to. And for the most part, the South started to do that with test. Tell me how many marbles there are in this jar. All right. Recite for me the first three amendments to the Constitution verbatim, and if you make a mistake, you don't get to vote. So these constrictions were implemented once the Supreme Court, the first time, took away our civil rights. The second time that these rights were implemented again was in 1965 with both the Civil Rights Act and then the Voting Rights Act. So the constriction of those rights is happening again.
So another cycle.
Another cycle.
And yet, we're all still here.
We are still here.
So, do you see so a lot of the conversations that I've been in with people, and particularly within an educational community, has been, well, what do we do? Right? Well, what do we do? And how do we talk about this in public? How do we assure people that, sure, we want to be law-abiding citizens, but we also want to point out that we've got a commitment to some other things that are pretty important.
Yes.
So, Dr. Walker-Jones, what do we do?
Well, I'm going to take a phrase from you that I stole recently.
All right.
And that is, the first thing we have to do is acknowledge that there are no such things as victories. What we have is an ongoing, continuous struggle. And it's not just for black folks. This is for all of us as citizens. We do a podcast, as you well know, here with some good friends of mine. And our podcast is entitled, Towards a More Perfect Union. It's the one phrase that, since I was a little kid, I keep studying and studying and studying because it paraphrases everything that this country is about. We keep struggling. We keep trying to get better. And with that struggle comes two things. One, it brings about, I hope, within each and every one of us, a willingness to strive toward becoming more perfect. I didn't say perfect because we're never going to be perfect, but we can move in that direction. The second thing it brings about is this idea that the struggle continues. That's why there are no victors, because the struggle continues, and I love giving this message to young people. We must always speak truth to power and continue to do what's right. And you can't do that from a lack of knowledge or a lack of information.
Sure.
You've got to keep yourself
Yeah.
out there. So let me move into some of the...
Let me do this. Let me ask you this. There are people, and how do you respond to folk who will say, well, yeah, we cannot have this in this country. We have to go with more of an absolute look at the theory being all men, and we'd probably say now women, are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, but created equally. And it's about time that we now are in a cycle where the Supreme Justices, the Supreme Court have said, no, you cannot make these race-conscious decisions. That is how we perfect the union.
I totally, at this point in time, disagree. And here's why. To not acknowledge that there are distinct differences among us is to ignore the reality that we play upon those differences. When we start, or stop, if you will, manipulating those differences, that's when we are moving toward a more, what I would call, neutral basis upon judging one another.
Gotcha.
We're not there yet.
So you say we're still doing that.
We're still trying to move in that direction, but we're not there yet. Okay.
All right.
When we can distinguish, and I'll accept part of this responsibility as men, when we think that we can control the health care of women, we're not there yet. I am also concerned that when we start to move into the household of a family that's struggling with their child who has yet to come to grips with his or her sexual identity or social identity, we're not there yet. When we as a country look at inequity, whether it's social or economic, especially economic, and we do nothing about it because we say, well, they're going to be losers and they're going to be winners. We're not there yet.
Okay.
When we have brothers and sisters who live with dirt floors in the Black Belt of Alabama, where I'm doing some consulting work, and in Mississippi, and we think that's okay, we're not there yet.
Okay.
So here's why I say that we are still moving toward being more perfect. But, and let me give you, again, now part of the work that I do.
I was going to ask you about that.
I am the executive director.
By the way, it sounds like you want to run for president.
No. Number one, I'm too old.
Well, no, you aren't.
Yeah, well, I mean, okay, personally,
You're qualified.
Right. I am qualified. Yes, I am qualified. You're absolutely right. I don't want to take anything away from Brother Joe Biden and stuff. It's not about age.
Right.
It's about your personal feeling. And he feels like he's 22, okay, or at least 35. And I feel a lot older than that. But the work that I do is with the Alabama HBCU Consortium.
Okay.
That's our name.
All right.
I'm the executive director. I have the responsibility of working with the state that has the highest number of HBCUs in the country.
And that's Alabama.
That's Alabama. And we have what's called HBCCs, historically black community colleges, and we have HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. And then there are two other legitimate contexts for what the Department of Education calls, one, minority, minority black institutions, MBIs, minority serving institutions, okay, MSIs, okay, and the same for community colleges.
Okay.
Now, here's what those mean. In 1965, the federal government, through the Department of Education, well, it was Health, Education, and Welfare at the time, okay, because the Department of Education wasn't created until Jimmy Carter's administration. But in 1965, the Department of Education established a set of criteria for HBCUs, HBCCs. Anyone who didn't fit into that criteria at the time, okay, were not designated with the HBCUs. However, since then, here's what's evolved. We have some universities that are now predominantly serving black communities, Native American communities, or indigenous communities, communities other than black and stuff, Hispanic, okay, Asian. And they have been given the designation majority black institutions, MBIs, okay, or minority serving MSIs, okay. So I'm giving you a little bit of insight into what my work is now, okay, in Alabama. As a result of that, what I'm trying to do is sort of bring the nexus between government support, private support, and the serving of those populations into focus.
I see.
Okay? So a university with a historic mission like Tuskegee University, okay, can continue its work without being, and here's where at least the government has sort of kept its hands off of their mission, without having to address the idea of, are you a segregated university? No, they are not. Do you exclusively serve the black community? No, they do not. They are open to anyone. And in many of these institutions, the HBCUs, we're finding that they are becoming extremely diverse, not only amongst American minorities and indigenous folks, but internationally. These universities are pulling individuals from China, Africa, other parts of Asia, as well as South America. So they're becoming really melting pots in and of themselves. Now, let me also move into another area of my work, which is helping those institutions develop a different kind of focus, not just academic, but something that Dean may also be moving toward, which is, I call it competency-based education. And here's what that means simply put. Instead of me saying I have a course in English 101, I can say that I have gained these skills and competencies as a result of going through English 101.
Right. And we do some of that work as well, where we say, look, let's make sure the student understands this course and how they talk about it, how they put it on their resume, and how they engage with communities, workforce, apprenticeships, the works.
Exactly.
Where it's not, as you said, it's not just English 101. We're not navel gazing. We are learning things that we carry out into the world.
Exactly. And in a nutshell, that's it. Because if I can't apply the work and the study to either some life force or need within my life, or workforce, and some need that I will have, or to my pleasure and entertainment.
If that's what it's about.
So all three of those should be acting upon me as I traverse through higher education. And that's what my work is, helping universities and colleges to try to make that transition from where you don't just have a transcript, but you have a set of skills and competencies as a result of going through these experiences.
Sure.
And many of them, we hope, will relate to an internship, an apprenticeship, some kind of look at a particular industry in terms of how I'm going to apply these skills and competencies into my life, my work, and my own personal entertainment.
Well, you're kind of living out the way you started your world, right? I'm still stuck on and to teach, right? And it's that same sort of thing where your education was about being able to make a pivot. Your education was about those things that you're curious about and putting them together so that, sure, I can live and make a life and work and play and do everything that makes me a human being based upon the stint of time that I'm going to spend with other people, learning and that sort of thing. So you're living out your dream.
I am a lifelong learner. I will freely admit that. Yes, I am a lifelong learner in all three aspects of my life. Hopefully I will slow down my workforce aspect and do more learning on my boat around fishing and boating, do more work around my, my golf, around my grandchildren. Okay. But yes, one would hope that as you sort of traverse through this life, that you're able to take those things and especially your advanced work, post-secondary. And the only, you know, I am very critical of politicians who say, well, college isn't for everyone. And for some of you, you won't go to college.
That drives me nuts.
It drives me batty. Because their phraseology is something that, oh yeah, forget that part. Never, ever take a potential out of your life. Why would I do that? There may be a course. There may be a certificate. There may be just an interest I have. Do you know how many people in this country don't realize that you don't have to be a full-time registered student in order to just take a course?
That's right.
And some of the best endeavors that I have ever had, and I can remember two of them. One was an Italian Renaissance course that I still have the notes for, Ken. I do. I still have the notes for that course. I lived in Germany from 1978, 1979. And when I went to Germany, I took those notes with me. Why? Because that professor told us, if you're ever in, be sure to see this or go here or it is a travel log. That to this day I relish. Florence, my family, we were on the way to Florence, had an incident that sort of diverted us from getting, I've never been there, but I still have those notes because within the next 2-3 years, I want to go to Florence. I want to follow his guide. You miss those things if you don't realize that there may be an opportunity. And some of these, you know, and I've got to give it to my colleagues, some of these kinds of opportunities to learn have been moved out of the university setting and into senior centers or community centers. And these are faculty members who are bringing this to you. So don't ever say, well, college isn't for everybody. There is something someplace that you may have an opportunity to do. And please don't close that door because someone said it's a college.
Well, you know, and you raise this really important thing too that people don't talk about with college, and you've said it. You're with other people. You are thinking with other people. You're talking to other people. This is not a solitary pursuit. This is something where you move out of the spaces where you exist in regularly. And that is just as valuable.
Yes.
And that is a part of this whole concept. And I do wish that when people talked about college, they also talked about the concept of college.
Yes.
Because it is not this flat, because often that's what we put it as. It's a flat sort of experience. I go to class, I read something, I take a test, I get certified.
Yes.
And that's why you get people saying, well, I can just watch a bunch of YouTube videos and learn what I need to do. I can get my PhD watching YouTube videos. and I think you'll find that very unfulfilling and real uncertainty for you, and doesn't help you deal with those uncertainties and those things in life you're going to deal with.
Right.
And to get the kind of advice that you got from that professor when you're in Germany.
Yeah.
By the way, he's sort of saying to you, too, when you're in Europe, by the way, get yourself to Europe.
Yes.
Right?
Get yourself over there.
Listen, young person, get yourself out of your neighborhood, off your block.
Right.
Go
Right.
to Europe, and when you're there, pull out your notes.
Right.
Right? And when you're there, go to that museum, talk to people in that museum, watch people in that museum, let them watch you and engage them. That's college.
Yes.
That's college.
Yes. And you know, and there's something else too that I picked up over my span of time, which not only relates to when you're there,
Yeah.
but also the mere fact that we have now so many other options to learn about
right.
where we might want to go.
Right.
There is a documentary that I am very, very high on, and it's called High on the Hog.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yes. I'm hoping they do another season of it.
I hope so too.
Right. Pardon the pun.
Yes, another season. It is, and when they start in Africa, I now have this passion and want to go to Senegal and some of the other places that they mention, not because of the fact that these places were the sort of step on the boat to nowhere
Right.
for many of us in the black community.
Right, right.
But it was also the place where we had to give up, survive, and try to retain that level of life and humanity that you're being unplugged from.
Right, right.
And when you consider that, and I'm very, very surprised and in some ways very ashamed of our country right now, when we can have an entire state that wants to ignore a part of our history because they want to paint it over with some other color and to hide the reality of what happened to people who were enslaved.
And you're referring to
Florida. And I'm referring to the Department of Ed, and I'm also referring to that not only are they covering, you know, one of the other things too that I think is important is to realize that there were other slaves other than Africans.
Sure, that's right.
There's a wonderful book, and I guess the academic in me just keeps coming out.
That's okay.
There's a wonderful book called Diary of an Irish Slave Girl.
Yes.
And it's about an Irish woman who was an indentured servant but found herself bound in slavery when she ends up in the Caribbean. And she is surrounded by African slaves, but it's about her tale in terms of what it was like to be Irish in the midst of the slave trade and actually a part of that trade.
Right.
So it is important for us to understand not only the sort of big brush pieces of history, but also the various compartments and nuances of history.
Right, right. Well, you have given us quite a bit by way of recommendations here. I mean, and you did real well with High on the Hog. It's really easy for people to say it's a history cooking show.
Yes,
right?
it is.
And
it is.
No, it's about humanity.
It is
about the way that people keep and capture and hold on and pass down their humanity. And the Diary of an Irish Slave Girl is the same sort of thing. It is it's that humanity and how we pull that and move it forward, and we keep it in some way sacred.
Right.
And at the same time, make sure that we share in And we go back full circle, those struggles.
Yes.
Right? Life has its meaning in those struggles.
Yes.
And we should celebrate those.
Absolutely.
As my mother would say, victories are for the gods.
Yeah.
So let's celebrate these struggles right now.
Yes.
And I think that comes from, if I'm right about it, I think that even comes from a bit of a pass on from Yoruba, I think, is a part of it overall. Well, look, I do have to wrap a little bit, and I always like to wrap up with recommendations. What else should we be looking at, thinking about in the next few days other than Oppenheimer or Barbie?
Yeah.
What are those things? What are those things? Well, what are you looking at, reading, writing about, thinking about? That, good recommendation for me.
Well, two things. One, I recommend to everyone to start to follow workforce development.
Talk to me about that.
Okay. I'm looking at the whole idea and concept of workforce development as part of everything that we do post-secondary and even some into secondary.
Yes.
Okay. And not for the sense that all of us have to go to work.
Right.
All right. I like people who are philanthropists. That's work.
Yeah, right.
Nonprofits. That's work. NGOs, non-governmental organizations. You hear the term thrown around, non-government organizations, NGOs. But I think it's important for us to look at workforce development as part of our well-being, juxtaposed by its other two counterparts.
Yeah.
Pleasure and entertainment for me as an individual.
Yeah, that's right.
Because it's not just about, quote, work.
Right.
It really is, how am I developing me?
That's well-being.
Yes.
Right.
And then the other part that I'd like to leave your viewers with is this aspect of lifelong learning. Learning never stops until your last breath. And even that is more than likely going to lead us into another form of learning on a different plane. And if you're religious like me, you have the hope, the belief, and the faith that that's going to transform us into something where we become even a deeper part of this environment, this universe that we're in.
Right.
So I'd like to leave you with that.
All right, so go back for a sec, lifelong learning. We hear that a lot.
Yes.
So, does that mean I have to go take a college course? What's that mean? I think we never really talk that through. I think people like you and me, we probably understand what that means for ourselves, but talk me through that a little bit.
Okay.
Especially even for the young college grad, I just graduated. What do you mean I still got to do some learning?
Yeah.
Or for the person more my age, your age, what do you mean lifelong? Do I got to go somewhere? What is that? What is that?
What that means is retain your curiosity about things that you come in contact with.
There you go.
That's it.
There you go.
If I'm using my phone and my grandchild says, Grandpa, what's up? They're not just asking me a question.
Right.
There's an app called What's Up.
Yeah, right.
Okay? And so I better sort of, what do you mean by that, sweetheart?
Right.
If I am trying to work with a colleague and the colleague says, hey, give me a Zoom call, I hope that at my age,
you understand that.
that I understand that and that I can go and click on my Zoom, I can set that up.
Stay up on it.
If I have a friend of mine who says, you know what, I just ran into this book and it's wonderful. And it's a highly technical book for a social worker called The Myth of Normal.
Okay.
That I'll be able to sit there and, not just say, I don't do that anymore.
Right.
I don't exercise my brain anymore.
Right.
If it's not just sort of a trashy novel, then forget it, okay? But then at the same time, too, if a friend of mine says, you know what, I just got into this book about vampires, and great summer, then I want to be able to pick that book up or to listen to it on a CD as well.
All right.
I'm constantly curious and always willing to bring things into not only my existence, but also exercise my right to say, oh, this is good.
Wow. A little inspiration right here at our doorsteps in and around Franklin, in and around Dean College. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Michael Walker-Jones.
Oh, listen, good doctor. It's a pleasure to be here. And again, welcome to Franklin.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.